All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Day 26, episode 27, 40 days of 4VKM. And episode 27, we're talking about the Crown Jewel 2. McAfee Theory is not a theory, it's a match. Say that 5 times fast. But anyway, this is one of my absolute favorite videos. It's a long one, so this video will probably be pretty long. But so much to cover, and actually I think it's probably my best researched episode, in terms of geopolitical events. I usually just showing a lot of wrestling clips. There is a lot of that in here because we're showing a parallel story of the Iron Sheik and the rise of the mullahs in Iran. But, when you go deep into it, you realize that, U.S. regime change has kind of been around for a long time. It happened here in this country with the JFK assassination, and that's kind of what was a domino effect then for the military-industrial complex to spread and then just get in the business of regime change. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. So the video starts off with JFK welcoming the Shah of Iran, the leader of Iran, before, things went to hell over there. And, if you go do your research and you go look into Iran back in the 60s and even the beginning of the 70s, you'll realize that they were very similar to the United States. Women had the same rights for the most part, or a lot more rights than they did under the theocracy that emerged with the mullahs, right? So, as usual, U.S. regime change happens and something way worse takes over, right? How many times have we seen that story? But anyway, so we have JFK with the Shah of Iran, and you have the leader of Iran talking great things about the United States, how we're a beacon of hope for the rest of the world. And, JFK had established the Peace Corps, right? So think of all the good work that was happening as a result of that as well. They had a friendship. They had something called the Firm Alliance. And that Firm Alliance really was, the strengthening of the two nations working together, the United States and Iran. You wouldn't think of this, in our day and age. If you grew up when I grew up, you just always knew Iran was nuts, right? There was a regime change happened. The regime change started with JFK, right? So that was the first linchpin. They take JFK out. Now they can kind of go do what they need to do throughout the rest of the world. So, Firm Alliance over with no JFK, right? So, we fast forward and we go to Jimmy Carter, president then, and he has the he has the Shah of Iran over, and he's trying to convince him to, hey, you need to do some stuff to, kind of get more progressive, right? So he's trying to guide him. He's kind of pledging his support, but ultimately Jimmy Carter helps lead to the Shah's downfall, right? And this is kind of where you see textbook regime change. So when I saw what they did in Iran, just going back and looking at the news clips and the series of events that happened out there, it's almost identical to what they tried doing in this country while Trump was the president, and also what we've seen them do in every other country that they didn't like the leader over there, so they wanted to go put in one of their puppets and then just cause death and destruction for the people of that country, right? So what did they do? And how did they get the Shah of Iran out, right? There's a lot of propaganda involved. You had, they were able to convince the oil workers to go on strike, right? Well, oil is like the number one export of Iran, right? So if you can infiltrate that group and get them to go on strike, then you're going to have some problems, right? Public pressure on whoever's in charge is going to start getting tough, right? You also had the universities, right? Does this sound familiar, right? So they had the universities rioting and, going crazy and protesting the Shah. And they were in support of the mullahs, right? And what were the mullahs? What did they want? They wanted to return to a constitution in Iran, which was basically, a theocracy, based off of the Quran, right? They wanted to live off of the Quran. It's different from what we do in the United States, but, we can't necessarily judge other countries, but the fact that these people supported this, I don't think they understood what they were really going to end up bringing in. And it's very similar to, the universities today that are protesting and begging for certain outcomes, and careful what you wish for. It's not always what you get, right? So another thing that they did is they propagated false flags, right? So, within the protests and the counter response to the protests, there's about 100 Iranians that were killed, right? But they had projected it to be a much bigger number than what they said it was. They said it was 7,000 Iranians that had been killed, right? So again, just imagine if Joe Biden killed 7,000 Americans, right? Or Donald Trump even, right? You'd have protests in the street. You'd have riots in the street, right? So combination of all these different things. And then ultimately what ends up happening, the Shah has to succumb, and the Shah steps down, and he exiles the country. Now, after this had happened, right, I'd say probably late 70s, early 80s, you have the Iron Sheik rising to power in WWE, right? And he is a manager by the name of Classy Freddie Blassie. Now, interesting thing about Freddie Blassie is that he was actually in the U.S. military. He was in the U.S. Navy. They called him Sailor Blassie. That was his title, right? So Mr. Blassie gets paired up with the Iron Sheik, and he becomes Ayatollah Blassie, right? So Iron Sheik was this big, tough Iranian guy. I believe he competed for their Olympic team. Very strong, amazing grappler, wrestler. And now he's one of the biggest bad guys in the WWF at the time, right? So, you kind of have that story. We're showing it. Granted, this wasn't happening the same exact time, but it was around the same time, right? It was a couple years after, which is usually what WWF does, or WWE. They usually trail a little bit behind on some of these events, or they're super ahead and years ahead before stuff happens, right? So, the Shah escapes. He has to leave Iran, and the mob that was out for the Shah, they would chant, "Death to the Shah, death to the Shah," right? And, what do we hear him say? "Death to America, death to America." Before it got to death to America, though, they went from death to the Shah, and then once he was gone, all right, who's new public enemy number one? Death to Carter. That's what they started chanting, right? So death to Carter, right? This caused a lot of animosity towards the United States, right? They weren't very happy with the United States. What do they end up doing? They take the U.S. Embassy, and then they take a ton of hostages within the U.S. Embassy, right? And this is all happening while Jimmy Carter is president. So when was that from? 76 to 80? Then Reagan comes in 1980. And then what happens on the first day of Reagan's presidency? The hostages are released, right? And not only are the hostages released on his first day, either first day is POTUS or POTUS elect, I don't recall which one, but not only were the hostages released, they were in captivity for exactly 444 days. So, not sure what the meaning of that number is, but I find it very interesting that it's 3 4s, 444, right? So, what else happens, right? Early 80s, the Iron Sheik, he beats Bob Backlund, who was WWF champion, and the Iron Sheik becomes the WWF champion, right? The Iranian figure, and in his promos that he's cutting, for years leading up to this, and his whole character, he talks about how the Ayatollah of Iran loves the Iron Sheik, how the Ayatollah loves wrestling, right? So they're building it all into the character and the whole storyline and whatnot, right? So it's very interesting, to say the least. And again, kind of shows how kind of cutting edge Vince McMahon and the WWE were always really skirting that line, whether it's Russia, Iran, they did some stuff with Iraq we're going to talk about. Not afraid to go where most media or entertainment companies won't go. So fast forward a little bit, we're talking about regime change, right? What became the new favorite tool for regime change under the Obama administration? It was Twitter, right? And they had a little thing called the Twitter Revolution in the Arab Spring, they called it, right? It started in Egypt and Tunisia and all these places, right? You know, they gave them the internet, they gave them Twitter, and they used Twitter to basically motivate the masses to come out and protest whatever the hell they wanted them to protest, right? And then what does that lead to? That leads to new leaders coming in that are aligned with those people who got wound up. Who wound them up? I don't know, the State Department. Speaking of the State Department, who's running the State Department at the time? It's Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Hill Dog. The Hill Dog is doing it, right? And what does she say? She gives this speech, and she says, you know, we are providing support for digital activists on the ground. And you know, then she starts saying about how the regimes over there are censoring the tools, right? So they're taking the social media platforms, they're banning them. They're not allowing the people to use them, right? And what does she say? She says, as certain platforms, as certain tools get taken away, you know, new tools will pop up, right? And I can't help, again, but think about the comparison to what they did here in the United States. Think about what they did to social media, right? They took all the Anons off Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, right? YouTube, right? They took them all off the main platforms. And, you know, but as they were taking off those platforms, new platforms emerged, right? You had Gab. You had Truth Social, Trump's platform. You had Rumble, which we love Rumble, right? You have Telegram even, right? That was a good one that popped up. You had 107 Daily, short-lived. I don't even know if it's still up, but, you know, had its moment. So you have all these platforms, all these other tools that Anons then were able to find. They used the same playbook on us that they did in the Middle East to get the regime change that they wanted over there. So these people are sick, I'll tell you. They are sick. They banned President Trump, right? After the whole J6 thing, you know. And what did they do with that? Well, first of all, when they banned him, how many people was he following? 51. 51 gematria. When I see 51, I think of WWE, because WWE equals 51. How many people were following him? 88 million. 88 equals Trump, right? So it's like when I was going and researching this and say, hey, what were the numbers when Trump got kicked off social media, off Twitter? It was 51-88, WWE Trump. So what are the odds of that, right? Love it. Love it, love it, love it. So, you know, going back to the Iron Sheik and Bob Backlund. Iron Sheik now is the WWF champion. And you have this new star that's emerging that's going to go and change the face of wrestling for decades to come, right? And his name is a household name. Everybody knows Hulk Hogan, right? So Hulk Hogan, and they actually just celebrated the 40th anniversary of Hulkamania because it was on January 24th, 1984, where Hulk Hogan defeated the Iron Sheik to become the WWF champion for the first time, and that's kind of what launched Hulkamania into the stratosphere, brother, right? So you have Hogan, he beats the Sheik, right? So the real American, as he's billed, the real American Hulk Hogan, red, white, and blue, Hulkamania, he's the guy that takes out the bad guy, the Iron Sheik from Iran, right? So a little piece of Americana right there. Get you, Iran. So what else do you have? You have, you know, fast forward years after that, you go to, well, before we get there, actually, sticking with the Iron Sheik, he actually ends up teaming with Nikolai Volkov, and they have a tag team for a little bit, right? And Nikolai Volkov is the Russian wrestler. Iron Sheik is the Iranian wrestler, right? And once the Ukraine-Russia war broke out, what did we do? We hit them with sanctions, right? We hit Russia with sanctions. Remember we kicked them off SWIFT? We did all this stuff to them. And who was giving Russia advice on how to evade the sanctions? It was Iran, right? So you had that Iron Sheik Nikolai Volkov connection, right? Iran and Russia, two buddies there. And now they're doing the whole BRICS thing together. And even with the Iran stuff that's happening now, where they just took the lives of a couple of our soldiers, you have Russia saying, don't retaliate on Iran. If you do, you're going to have problems, right? So not a good situation going on over there by any means. Speaking of not a good situation by any means, you have George H.W. Bush becomes the president. We know he becomes president after Reagan, so sworn in 1989, January. And what's he do when he's giving his oath of office? When he's supposed to say, "So help me God," he says, "So help me," and he skips God, right? Go watch the speech. It's not edited. You can see him skip the word, right? And he kind of laughs about it, too. He's sick, right? I mean, why? He's sick. Let's just say that, right? And what's his whole thing? He wants to go to war with Iraq, right? So, Desert Storm starts up, and you have this, this tensions rising. You have Saddam Hussein going to Kuwait. Very similar to Putin going into Ukraine, right? Who really knows the reasons why? I didn't get that far into it, so, I can only speculate. But you have Saddam Hussein going into Kuwait. Around the same time, you have Sgt Slaughter now, and this is before the war gets hot, right? You have Sgt Slaughter. He was G.I. Joe, right? He was a U.S. Marine character, literally G.I. Joe in that whole mix. And he becomes a turncoat, and he becomes an Iraqi sympathizer. So he becomes an Iraqi sympathizer, and he basically becomes Saddam Hussein's mouthpiece on WWF television. Saddam Hussein even sent, this is all story, right? But Saddam Hussein sends him boots, right? So he wears these boots with the points on it, on the shoes, right? And he's like giving messages, right? So Bush had set a deadline for Saddam to leave Kuwait, and that deadline was 1/15/91. And before that week, before that deadline came, Sgt Slaughter's on WWF TV saying, Saddam Hussein will never leave Kuwait, and that deadline is going to come and go, and nothing's going to happen, right? Well, what happens on 1/16? F around and find out, Saddam Hussein, right? On 1/16, Bush announces that he is essentially, going to war. Operation Desert Storm is underway, right? So, what's happening around the same time? On 1/19 is the Royal Rumble, right? So remember I told you this in an episode prior, that you had Sgt Slaughter was, doing the whole Iraqi sympathizer gimmick. Ultimate Warrior was the champion at this point, WWF champion. And, you have this whole, it could go to war, right? It doesn't look good. Tensions are very high, right? But it hadn't gotten to that point yet where there's American troops on the ground fighting for this thing, right? So what ends up happening? Immense pressure on Vince and the writing team at WWF, and ultimately it was Vince's call. He says, no, we're going ahead of this, right? They're begging him. Bruce Pritchard, I believe, did a podcast saying he was begging him, just drop the angle, right? But Sgt Slaughter had a match 3 days later with the Ultimate Warrior. And what does Vince do? He puts the championship belt on Sgt Slaughter, the Iraqi sympathizer, 3 days into the Operation Desert Storm, right? So just absolutely nuts and ballsy, to say the least, right? So Slaughter becomes the WWF champion at that Royal Rumble in his match with Ultimate Warrior. And then in the same night, Hulk Hogan wins the Royal Rumble. What happens when you win the Royal Rumble? You go to WrestleMania to face the champion, right? So it's going to be Hogan versus Slaughter, WrestleMania 7. Who's sitting front row? It's DJT. They interview him earlier in the show. He's there with Chuck Norris and with Mr. Universe, the Incredible Hulk. And he's there with the Fonz, right? And Macaulay Culkin's there as well. And, it's just a wild, wild group that you have there. And you have Hulk Hogan. He beats Sgt Slaughter with President Trump looking on, clapping. And essentially the war was over, right? The war had ended on 2/27. And then this WrestleMania was 3/24. They kept the story going until then. And, you know, at the end of WrestleMania, the announcer, Gorilla Monsoon, is heard saying, the war is finally over, right? It's like the whole WrestleMania season was Operation Desert Storm. So it's just crazy. And how did it end? USA on top, right? Sound familiar? Now, the other interesting thing about that WrestleMania that I always think is fascinating, right? Trump was there with Ivana, his first wife at the time. But who is the guest timekeeper at this WrestleMania? It is his second wife, Marla Maples, right? So, you know, I don't know what happened there, but it's very interesting that she's the timekeeper and then she becomes Trump's wife, right? While he's there with his first wife. So, very interesting. All right, so speaking of Trump, what's his famous phrase that he used to use when he was running for president in 2016? He'd say, Iran is taking over Iraq. And that actually happened in WWF, right? So, you know, and this was back in that, you know, early 90s period. The group that Sgt Slaughter was associated with was called the Triangle of Terror, right? And it was basically an Iraqi-Iranian, you know, Iron Sheik was in it. So, and then Sgt Slaughter, and then they had another guy. And so you have that Iraq and Iranian connection right there. Then you have George W. Bush, right? So you had the Triangle of Terror, and then it's like he stole his name almost from it. Remember, he had the Axis of Evil, which was Iran, Iraq, and North Korea. So, you know, Triangle of Terror, Axis of Evil, kind of the same thing, right? Very similar, at least seemed it to me, right? So, you know, you have all of that, you have the weapons of mass destruction, right? Remember, that's what they used to get into Iraq. They lied, as Trump said. They lied. They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were no weapons of mass destruction, is what Donald Trump said to Jeb Bush, annihilated him and his brother in that debate that they had in 2016. And that was the beginning of the end of Jeb. If you remember how stupid Jeb looked in that debate, he did the high five with Trump and everything. He just looked like an idiot. And I'm so glad that Trump came along, right? Because think about it, folks. Before Trump came down the escalator, we were staring dead at a Hillary Clinton versus Jeb Bush, you know, matchup for the presidency of the United States in 2016. And that was kind of my waking up moment, right? Before even Trump showed up, I'm like, how the hell in this country with 300 million plus people are we only electing Bushes and Clintons? It makes no sense. I mean, if you go back, you had Reagan was there for 8 years. Bush was there behind the scenes as the vice president. They shot Reagan, so they kind of showed who was in charge, right? Then Bush takes over for 4 years. Then he hands the baton to Clinton, and he has this weird relationship with Bill Clinton, right? Like a father-son deal. And then what happens after Clinton? W shows up, right? So then you get W. So you get Clinton for 8 years, father-son relationship with HW. Then you get W back in. Not to mention you have Barbara Bush, who, by the way, Barbara Bush, very manly. I'm not going to go all the way and say she's a man, but I never thought about it because I was just a little kid when I used to see Barbara Bush on TV, but very, very manly. And I think Trump said one time she's tougher than Jeb. I think that makes sense because she looks like she's flat. She looks like Popeye, for God's sakes. But enough about her. Let's go back to the story. So you almost had Hillary versus Bush. You would have gotten another 8 years of W, and then we got some time off. We got Obama, right, for 8 years, and then it almost went back to either Clinton or Bush, right? Thank God it didn't. And I forgot to mention, too, Hillary was around for a lot of Obama's term as well as the Secretary of State before that stiff John Kerry showed up. So, all right. Bob Backlund, right? We were talking about him earlier. Bob Backlund showed back up in 2016, and usually the WWE was very involved with presidential elections, right? They did the whole Obama versus Hillary thing in 2008. They interviewed McCain, they interviewed Hillary, they interviewed Obama. I I think they did the same thing in 2004 with Bush and Kerry. They always gave the candidates a platform to speak, and they never really picked a side, right? And 2016, though, they stayed out of it, but they signaled in different ways, right? So one of the ways was they had Bo Dallas, who, Bo, 17, Dallas, 17, Dallas. He came out with a sign, and it would say, "Believe in Bo," right? So, believe in Bo. Bo is 17, so believe in Q, believe in 17, right? So he would come out with that sign, and that sign was shaped the same font, lettering, color scheme as the Trump 2016 signs, right? Same border, same star pattern, everything. It was the same sign. Just look at it, right? Then you had Bob Backlund come back. Bob Backlund starts managing a wrestler called Darren Young. And again, they're not endorsing any candidates. They're not even bringing it up, right? But they have Bob Backlund, his whole catchphrase for Darren Young is, "We got to make Darren Young great again," right? So make Darren Young great again. Like that's their whole thing, right? MDYGA. Instead of MAGA, it was MDYGA. And if you do the gematria on that, it's 50. And 4VKM is 50. Now 4VKM came after, so I'm not saying it was that. It's just a nice little coincidence and synchronicity there that we like to say. So Bob Backlund's back, and years before that, in the mid-90s, I want to say like 95, 96-ish, you have a scenario where Bob Backlund introduces the Iron Sheik, and they're kind of, JR says on commentary, "What's this? Bob Backlund and the Iron Sheik, they're in cahoots together," right? Now, Iron Sheik is the guy that beat Bob Backlund for the WWF Championship. Now they're teaming up in the 90s as like a duo, a manager duo, right? And who else was in cahoots, right? You had Bob Backlund. In this case, I'm representing as John Kerry. And then Iron Sheik is Iran, right? So they're in cahoots together, right? And Trump's always mentioned the Iran deal and how bad of a deal it is. And who set that deal up? It was Kerry. Look at Kerry's wife. Look who Kerry's wife is married to. I mean, it's just like what we were talking about yesterday with the Ukraine and the corruption there. Let's give them some money. The money will filter down into us somehow, and nobody will know, right? It's just, and if anybody ever asks, deny, right? And if Trump ever asks, accuse him of doing it, right? That's the name of the game. Projection, right? Projection. So this is where Iran gets really interesting, right? There's a lot of Iran stuff that happened, during the whole Russia thing. Valerie Jarrett. So Valerie Jarrett was one of the close advisors to the Obamas. She goes way back with Michelle Obama, right? You have Valerie Jarrett. She's Iranian, right? So she's, I think her mother was Iranian. Her father had immigrated from the United States to Iran. So you have Valerie Jarrett, Iranian, very close to Obama and those peeps, right? Very close to Michelle Obama. She watched her grow up and become Michelle, right? Just like the book. And then it gets even weirder, right? General Flynn. We know he wasn't in the administration very long, but when he was, one of the last things he did was put Iran on notice. Remember that day? He came out like a G, and he was like, "Today, we're putting Iran on notice. Thank you very much." And he walked away, right? He probably said a little bit more than that. But, I mean, I remember seeing that and be like, "Damn, that's badass. Get him, Flynn," right? So, you have Flynn put on notice, and then what happens right after? He's gone, right? He puts Iran on notice. Shortly after, he's forced out by the whole Russia thing. Now, when we go to Russia thing, who were two of the big factors in the Russia hoax? It was the lovebirds, as Trump likes to call them. It was Peter Strzok and his lover, Lisa Page, right? The two lovebirds, as he likes to say. And they have Iranian connections, too. What are the odds of this? Peter Strzok grew up in Iran. Wow, what are the odds of that? And Lisa Page's mom was from Iran as well. So just Iran all over the place. Iran. Now, and actually, I think we're playing the Iran song, right? Like Iran, right? But we're using it for Iran. Get it? You know, a little bang. So, so you have Lisa Page, you have Peter Strzok, the lovers. They love Iran as well, right? Which it's okay to love your country, right? But should you be in these positions? It's a little sus, especially when the guy that you take out with the 302s and all that stuff, the missing 302s, he puts Iran on notice, and then boom, you know, he's out of there. Then you have Mueller and the FBI. It was reported that they kind of kiboshed some intel that said that Osama bin Laden was hiding out in Iran, right? So they, again, think of what we did in the Middle East. We attacked Afghanistan and we attacked Iraq for 9/11. There's more proof that Saudi Arabia had stuff to do with it than Iraq or Afghanistan, right? Now, they say the Taliban and all that stuff, but if bin Laden was in Iran and they knew about it, I mean, again, this is just a dark cloud over the head of the United States that it needs to get cleared up one day. It has to. So you have, they covered up where bin Laden was because they didn't want to impact Iran. And our last stop with Iron Sheik here is the last WrestleMania that Iron Sheik competed at. You know what number? You know what number it was? It was WrestleMania 17, or as they called it, X7. And it was in the Houston Astrodome at the time. And there was a gimmick battle royal that they had, which was like all these goofy characters from the past, old timers, legends, whatnot. And they had the battle royal where you have to throw your opponents over the top rope. Whoever's last remaining wins. And the Iron Sheik was the last remaining person in the battle royal. And a funny thing about this is that as Iron Sheik was walking down to the ring, it was a very long ramp, huge ramp, right, from the stage to the ring. So, I mean, I think they were introducing wrestlers after him, and they were walking past him because he was still walking down. You know, he wasn't in the best shape, right? But Iron Sheik, you know, was basically... he passed away after this, right? But the announcer on commentary, Bobby the Brain Heenan, he goes, by the time the Iron Sheik gets to the ring, it will be WrestleMania 38. Now, this is at WrestleMania 17. Well, the year that this video came out was WrestleMania 38, which was in Dallas. So, it's kind of interesting to me, right? This video is coming out the same year as WrestleMania 38, and we have Bobby the Brain kind of, you know, putting that marker on. The only reason I caught that is because social media was having fun with it, and they were saying, Iron Sheik's finally going to make it to WrestleMania 38, right? So, you know, they would say, Iron Sheik is coming, WrestleMania 38. So, it was perfect to put in this video in that spot. All right, so Iron Sheik wins WrestleMania 38 in 2022. Let's talk a little bit about the Saudis now. We're green because that's the Saudi color, right? Saudi flag, green. And we've talked about this before. I open up this part with a clip of Bill Gates meeting with Khashoggi and meeting with bin Talal, right? Bin Talal al-Luid, or I don't care about how to say his full name. But anyway, if you recall, both Bill Gates and bin Talal, they each own 45% of the floors that Stephen Paddock shot all those people in Las Vegas back in 2017, right? So, and I had touched about Khashoggi in the past, I think in the last Crown Jewel video, and I kind of said, you know, show me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are. He's hanging out with these guys, right? It's in the video. It's Khashoggi with these guys, so you can see it yourself. So you have Saudi Arabia. They do their purge. Remember, they do their raid where they round everybody, all the royal princes up after MBS gets in, and bin Talal is one of those people. Right now, he is a major investor in American companies at this time: Apple, Twitter, Obama, Citigroup, News Corp. Right? I throw Obama in there. If you look at the news clip, the news didn't have this in there, but with all the logos, all the corporate logos, boop, Obama's face pops up there too, because remember what the drop said. Who paid for Mr. Obama's Harvard education? I don't know. So you have bin Talal al-Luid, and he was also, remember, a big investor in Twitter. So on 12/21/17, we know what happened that day with Trump and the executive order, right? He did the executive order, 12/21, take it away. And basically, I'm on the conspiracy horseman at this point and explaining it to those guys and saying, that Trump had this executive order that went after human trafficking worldwide, corruption of any sort, right? And if they were involved in human trafficking or corruption, he had the power to seize their assets, take their shit, right? And that's where the whole story gets interesting, right? So if we're all watching a movie, and we've been watching a movie, who owns all this stuff? Because it seems like the same people own it, but do they? I don't know. Do we own it? Maybe we own it. Maybe Trump owns it. I don't know. So, but what else happened that day? There's a couple things that happened that day. First thing that's noteworthy for this video is that's the day that somebody said on Twitter, hey, Elon, you should buy Twitter. And he replied, how much is it? Right? On 12/21/17. He's going to take that away eventually, right? So on the same day, and this is the point I make to the conspiracy horsemen, the news media on 12/21/17 probably didn't mention Trump's executive order at all. I doubt that they did, right? But there was some notable CEO resignations that day. And remember, we're tracking CEO resignations during this period. And the one that everybody in the country, I promise you will remember, was the day. I'm not going to say you remember the date exactly, right? But you remember when the CEO of Papa John's resigned, right? They said he was racist. He had said the racist stuff on the conference call, right? They got him. He had to go. Papa John is out. Papa John. So you have the Papa John CEO out, and that's like the biggest story in the news that day. It was the biggest story on social media. It was the biggest story everywhere. The same day, there was another CEO that resigned. Much bigger company. Much more important to national security, elections, flow of information. And that was the CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt. Now, do you remember in the drops, Eric Schmidt was seen in North Korea teaching them how to internet and stuff, right? So, this guy resigns from Alphabet on 12/21/17. What are the odds? It's the same day that this executive order drops, right? He ends up going to Boston Dynamics, and that's the company that makes the creepy robots, the robot dogs and all that stuff. That's Eric Schmidt now, right? But he used to be the top guy at Google. But then 12/21/17 came away and took that away from him. So I always thought it was interesting. Why did they hit us with this smokescreen? Why was the Papa John's thing the biggest story of the day that day when the CEO of Google, the biggest company in the world, had resigned, and most people didn't hear anything about it, right? So look here, not there. Look here, not there. Great saying. All right, where else? What else we got here? Oh, well, we're talking about CEOs resigning, right? And I'm on the conspiracy horseman, and around that time, maybe a couple years before, Kate Spade had passed away. They say she took her own life, hung herself with a red scarf. Bin Hameen asked me when I'm talking about these CEO resignations, he goes, was there any red scarves involved? I'm like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Then I looked it up, and I said Kate Spade hung herself with a red scarf. So I'm like, oh, jeez. But there's other CEOs that stepped down too. GGP asked me that. He goes, weren't there a bunch of CEOs that stepped down? I said, unbelievable amount, right? So from 2017 to the time we're making this video, a ton of CEOs stepped down, right? And we go through them. There's McDonald's, Pepsi, I think Intel, Les Moonves, CBS News, right? You had a lot of executives step down. A lot of news media executives step down. Politicians we talked about, but the C-suites got shaken up after 12/21/17. That's for damn sure, right? And then who else steps down eventually? Jack from Twitter. So Jack steps down, and then the CTO takes over. He becomes the new CEO. And then Elon takes his stake into Twitter, right? He drops his big stake in it, and this is 2022, so that's how long this has been going on now. And then that gets everybody freaking out, right? Gets CNN freaking out, MSNBC, even Barack Obama gives a policy speech, and he comes out of retirement to give a policy speech on why we need to regulate social media companies, right? Because, they have too much power. Interesting, they didn't have too much power when he was the president, and they were used as a weapon against his, political enemies, if you say, and it's very interesting how that works out, right? But, again, it's projection. I laughed. They got the one guy on MSNBC, and he's like, this is so scary. If they have a guy like Elon running Twitter, they can shadow ban people. They can ban political opponents. They can even ban entire members of a political party, right? This is all stuff that they did to the Republicans and Trump, right? They took Trump. Trump was the president. They took him off Twitter. Poor Marjorie Taylor Greene, she got taken off Twitter a bunch of times. Yet any candidate that had been taken off Twitter up to this point was a Republican. There was no Democrats taken off Twitter for censorship, right? So it's just amazing that they have the balls to stand up and say, oh, this is the worst thing that could happen to us. This isn't fair. They could influence elections. Oh my God. And then we wouldn't even know they influenced elections until after the election. Kind of like what they did to the New York Post and the Hunter Biden laptop story, right? Remember when Twitter was censoring and deleting anybody that shared that post, the laptop from hell, the New York Post article? Even if you shared the New York Post article, you could have gotten banned. I mean, it was nuts. And then they have the balls to say, oh my God, they can do this to us, right? It's unbelievable, right? But it makes for a good movie too, so I'm glad it all happened like this, right? So that's kind of the Twitter and Elon connections there. We get more into Twitter and Elon as we get into the third crown jewel, which is going to be a couple episodes from now, and equally as fun. Maybe not as fun as this one. I really like this one, but all right, we introduced this guy a couple episodes ago. We've been talking about some McAfees, right? We talked about John McAfee. We talked about how he didn't kill himself. All the stuff that was going on there. And then at the same time, we introduced Pat McAfee, right? Former football player, worked for Barstool Sports for a point when he retired. Now he does his own show. Then he got involved with the WWE. And just as of last Monday, he's the commentator for Monday Night Raw now. So, Pat McAfee, he, in 2022, is commentating his first Royal Rumble match, right? He's very excited. Royal Rumble is a very fun night, right? They're in St. Louis, and they got McAfee on the mic, right? He's explaining how excited he is. In the match, they have Austin Theory is a wrestler, and Austin Theory becomes the protege for Vince McMahon, right? So Vince has been grooming Austin Theory to be like the next big superstar in WWE on television, and as Austin Theory's in the ring, and he's fighting with somebody, I think AJ Styles or somebody, Michael Cole brings up the fact that nobody, the last person to win the Royal Rumble from the number 2 spot was Vince McMahon, Mr. McMahon he calls him, right? And McAfee goes, you mean Vincent Kennedy? So I did a double take when I heard that. I said, whoa, he just called him Vincent Kennedy, and that's Vince's name, Vincent Kennedy McMahon, right? But we're always talking about two Vincent Kennedys. We got the VK and we have Vincent Kennedy McMahon, right? So two Vincent Kennedys kind of telling the same story. And what I mean by that, just trying to raise the vibes and wake people up to the reality of the world that we're in. Now, going back to Austin Theory, his Twitter account at the time, it's been changed since then, but it was Austin Theory 1, right? Demonetize that. comes out to 176. There's that 176 again. How do they write the date 617? In 90% of the world, it's 17.6, right? 40-year plan is 176. I told you my name is 176, right? So I always thought that was interesting. Wow, it's Vince's protege, right? Austin Theory 176. He goes to Saudi Arabia, right? He's going to compete in the Elimination Chamber match there for the WWF Championship, where Bobby Lashley, our guy Lashley, he's the champion going into that match, and he fights 5 other guys defending his title. It's in Saudi Arabia. Now, there's a clip of Austin Theory doing the dance with the Saudis. You know, it's not the sword dance. They didn't give him the sword, right? But it's at a very similar looking event where all the WWE superstars were invited. And, they're doing the Saudi dance, right? Doing the Saudi dance. And I show you the side-by-side from when Trump was dancing with the Saudis there. And it's kind of funny, too, when you had Wilbur Ross there. He's Wilbur Ross. It's like 100 years old dancing. But, so, Austin Theory over there. What happens in that Elimination Chamber match? Brock Lesnar wins the Beast, right? He wins the WWE Championship by defeating Austin Theory, essentially, as the last man. And then he's now going to WrestleMania as the WWE Champion. Now, Brock Lesnar goes on the Pat McAfee show. Remember, we started talking about McAfee here, right? So, Brock Lesnar goes on the Pat McAfee show, which Brock Lesnar doesn't really do interviews and stuff like that, right? So, it's very interesting that Brock goes and does this interview, sits down for like an hour. Awesome interview with Brock and Pat McAfee. And then that kind of leads up a little bit to when Vince McMahon goes on the Pat McAfee show, which Vince McMahon hasn't done a public interview with anybody in years, like forever, right? He just hasn't been doing them, right? So for him to kind of go and do this interview, and this is the year before the shit hits the fan with him in the summer on June 17th, he has all this, it's a very anticipated interview, right? Now, I'm watching the interview, and I'm having a blast, right? Because I get to listen to Vince McMahon talk for, an hour, however long it is. With Pat McAfee, who's a great, just personality in general, right? So, Vince is on the show with McAfee, and there's one of McAfee's boys, as they call him. His name is Boston Drew. Wow, what are the odds of that, right? So there's a little Patriot flag pennant on the desk where across from Vince, right? It says Drew, and it's the Patriot logo, right? And there's all this Boston stuff on the desk because Boston Drew sits there, right? So I loved how that lined up perfectly. And the day after that interview, I want to say because that was a Thursday, and then I went to SmackDown that Friday. So remember yesterday's episode, I showed up with the sign, and Sami Zayn was looking at it, right? Well, same episode is when McAfee's out on commentary because he's commentating for SmackDown at this point. And when Vince was on McAfee's show, he said, "I have an offer for you. I want you to compete at WrestleMania this year," right? And McAfee couldn't believe it. What a dream of his to be able to compete at WrestleMania. He said he'll get him an opponent and let him know, right? So McAfee's at commentary, and this guy, Austin Theory, he comes out and he basically says, "I'm your opponent at WrestleMania," right? And you have this beautiful shot of McAfee, Austin Theory, and the 4VKM sign right in the middle of the two of them. It's just like the universe, the stars aligned, everything was just picture perfect for this. I mean, you just can't make it up, right? So check it out. You got to see the video because it's just epic shot, timing. You got, see, the key to signs, you want to get your sign on TV, you got to be doing two things at one time, right? You got to be ready to lift your sign, but you got to be watching the video screen as well, right? Because then when the shots are in, and then, they're on me, raise the sign up, right? So, nail it. And then you got to put the sign back down because you don't want to obstruct the view of the people behind you and have people yelling at you and stuff. So, it's an art. It's an art and it's a skill. But for anybody that wants to rep 4VKM signs at WrestleMania, at, any future WWE event, highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. you might get some shit from people because they don't like Vince McMahon right now, but you'll have balls. That's for sure, right? So they do the match, right? And McAfee makes his WrestleMania debut wrestling, and he's walking out. You got a big sign, McAfee, right? McAfee, Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders are bringing him out, right? And he beats Austin Theory, but then Vince McMahon comes out and takes his suit off, and then basically challenges McAfee, makes a match with McAfee right there on the spot. And what's interesting is that for months leading up to this WrestleMania, the report was that Pat McAfee was going to fight Vince McMahon at WrestleMania. Nobody knew why. It didn't make any sense, right? Why the hell would McMahon and McAfee fight at WrestleMania? That doesn't make any sense. McMahon's like 77 years old, 76 years old this time. Nobody wants to see that, right? It's just super random. Like, what are you doing, right? Everybody kind of forgot about that until Vince went on McAfee's show, and then people were like, oh shit, are they actually going to do it? Are they going to go set that up now? Like, what's that about? It's very interesting. So they don't advertise it. They don't do any of that. But Vince comes out after the match with Austin Theory and challenges him to a match. Austin Theory hits McAfee from behind, beats the hell out of him. And, what ends up happening from there, Vince McMahon gets a football and he does one move. He basically punts the football into the side of Pat McAfee. McAfee was a punter, so he used his own move against him, essentially. And Vince McMahon gets the win. His only victory at WrestleMania, right? All those years in WWE, he's actually competed in a lot. Let me see if I can remember him real quick. His first WrestleMania he competed at, what number you think it was? Yes, it was WrestleMania 17. He fought his son Shane at that WrestleMania. Then the next one was WrestleMania 19. He fought Hulk Hogan. He lost. The next one from there was, I want to say, WrestleMania 21. He lost to Shawn Michaels. Then WrestleMania 23, we know what happened. Him and Umaga lost to Donald Trump, right? So look at the guys that McMahon has fought at WrestleMania. Then at WrestleMania 26, he fights Bret the Hitman Hart, right? So it's just all Hall of Famers he fights at WrestleMania, except his son, but he should be in the Hall of Fame one day. But then he finally gets that W against McAfee, right? He gets a W at WrestleMania 38, 12 years after his last WrestleMania match. So good to see. And it's almost like he wanted that one last hurrah. It's like he knew everything that was coming down the line in the future. I lay it out in an episode in couple episodes from now, where basically that whole scandal that came out about Vince starting in 2022, it was all programmed into WWE television going decades back, like over 10 years back to a T. They even told you the date he was going to step down. So we have a whole episode on that. Gotta see it. So McMahon beats McAfee. It's McAfee Mania, right? And you have McMahon beating McAfee. And he's doing his walk, and I show you the clip. He's doing his walk in the ring, and you have these signs that say McAfee Mania, right? And then we transition to that McAfee Q account on Telegram. You remember that account, right? They were dropping some very interesting stuff, and then they went haywire, right? And I think that's what happens a lot of times. I told you about this before. It's like, they start these things and then they leave them, and then they're left for other people, and then it's disinformation from there. But I think in the early days, it's good information. Maybe some of it is disinformation still too, but they definitely serve their purpose. I think a lot of times too could be serving their purpose to throw the enemies off, right? So you have McAfee on Telegram now, the afterlife, right? And the McAfee Telegram account is dropping all the stuff. It drops a video of JFK's voice, right? Now you can tell it's computer, AI generated speech that they use with JFK's voice, but it's very interesting. They talk about how Trump will be the 45th president, and him and Jr. will prevail, right? And the most noteworthy thing from that speech really was, he mentions Junior would show up in 2024, right? So hopefully that's the case. Hopefully that's what happens. I'm not going to be waiting past 2024 at this point, but we'll see what happens, right? So you have, as he's going through it, one of the other interesting things he says is that something along the lines of the world is not prepared for what they're about to learn, you know, and in that instance, I'm thinking about the EBS, right? Now, I've mentioned a couple times on this show now, WrestleMania 17. WrestleMania 17, the cold open to WrestleMania 17 is people worldwide glued to their television, having all sorts of different reactions, right? So people all over America, people all over the world, whatever they were doing, they stopped and they were looking at these TV screens, right? And when I saw that in the cold open of WrestleMania 17, I said, wow, that gives off very strong EBS vibes for sure, emergency broadcast system. So who knows, right? Still waiting for that EBS to drop there. I also show a couple clips because I don't remember which one. It was either Mr. Poole or Loop. I think it was Mr. Poole had put out a video and it ended with an XRP logo, the Ripple logo or the XRP logo at the end of their video, and it's all black and white, like black and white ink graphics and stuff like that, so you don't really you can't really make anything up. You can just kind of see shadows and outlines of people, right? And I started, you know, freezing it, you know, frame by frame and looking at it, and one of the figures that you have in that video is a dead outline of JFK Jr. So I thought that was interesting. You know, JFK Jr. is in this Mr. Poole video with, you know, the XRP logo at the end. Interesting. And then another thing that you'll notice is in that same video, if you guys can find it, but I put the clips that I saw in the 4VKM so you can see it there too. You see it's like a car, right? It's a car passing by. And again, I slowed that down. And then I started looking for any of the footage of of JFK's limo in Dallas. And sure enough, I found a perfect match. And I put that over the Poole video. And you can see it, right? So you see Junior over the Poole video. You see the limo over the Poole video. It's very weird. What's Mr. Poole saying here about the JFKs and XRP? I don't know, but I love it. I love it, Mr. Poole. Keep it coming. Let's get some more of those, right? So that's kind of it. If you remember how we ended the first crown jewel, it was a wrestler by the name Lacey Evans, right? And Lacey Evans was involved in the story. In that video, she's talking about kind of her hard upbringing and how she's so thankful she became a U.S. Marine, and that ultimately led her to WWE. So she's back a couple years later, and she's doing a new character change, and it's all about the story of Lacey Evans and her, again, telling about her tough upbringing, right? One of the things that caught my mind in that one was she mentions having a lot of interaction with child protection services, right? And a lot of people are going to assume they're not good all the time, right? So she mentions not having a good experience with them, and not having a good experience with certain law enforcement as well. But ultimately, you know, she never gave up, and that was one of her big things. And you know, in that video at that point where she's saying I'll never give up, I break the four walls a little bit, right? And as she's speaking, I show you what my desk looks like as I make 4 VKMs. John Cena is known for never give up, and he's got the flag, the never give up flag, right? So my mom was sick at around WrestleMania 2018. She wasn't doing great, and you know, she was in and out, so you know, we were dealing with it, and I stopped to see her on my way to WrestleMania, and you know, I was gonna bring her a gift back on the way back, and the gift was the never give up flag that John Cena had. I got one of the towels that he uses, right? So they sold that. She was a big John Cena fan. She loved the message, right? Never give up, because she had cancer. She had to go through a lot of stuff. So, and she never gave up, right? That was her motto, never give up. So, you know, I had the flag hanging in her hospital room. So whenever she would wake up, she would see that message right there. So, you know, just a very powerful for me, part of that video. And again, you know, you gotta appreciate John Cena and the message that he delivers overall, you know, to you know, inspiration to so many people like my mom and so many others. So unfortunately, she had passed away on Mother's Day of all days that year. But you know, I still have that flag, and I keep that flag over my desk. So, you know, when I'm doing the videos and everything like that, I'm always reminded, never give up, right? So everybody should be reminded about that. So I appreciate Lacey for having the same message, right? I think it's a message that everybody needs to hear. Never give up. You know, never give up. It's just so important. President Trump's never given up. We can't give up on him right now. So we gotta hang in there, right? So that's it. That's the episode. Gets a little emotional there at the end for me, but you know, check it out. It's one of my favorite episodes. Crown Jewel 2. McAfee Theory isn't a theory, it's a match, because it was a match, right? They had the match in McAfee versus Theory, like McAfee Theory, right? So my theory is that McAfee's still doing stuff behind the scenes, right? The other McAfee, John. So check that out. Make sure subscribe for VKM Podcast. Link below. Link for the videos below too. Check out the other Crown Jewel also, because it gives you some good context when you line these two videos up with each other too. And then 4vkm.com for all your 4VKM episodes. You can go watch them in order. Go see any of the ones that you like. 4vkm.com. So until tomorrow, have a good night. And of course, as always, enjoy the show.